It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
Hey guys, how is it going? And welcome to the Morning Star Drive on 117.8. It is Tuesday, August 8th, and so happy for you joining us. We are ready to start another day together with the Lord. So subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. Today we have an exciting podcast for you. We have Provi in the media, the practical word study, and of course commentaries, updates, and news on what is happening around the world in this history today. All right, everyone, how are you doing? Yes, it is Tuesday. We're getting into the the meat of the week. Monday is done. How was your Monday? I had a wonderful holiday over here in Vancouver. Yes, it was a long weekend. If you haven't yet, go ahead, leave a like and comment to build our community. Really happy for everyone joining us every weekday on the Morning Star Drive. So let's get up and support each other each and every day. This week's Sunday message, the title is Learn From Me Again. All right, Learn From Me Again. And maybe that's the reason why the Saturday pre-dawn message was kind of similar, because we need to learn again. Like, it's a similar message. I don't know. That's just some of my thoughts that I've been having. So, what happened this week? Like in the weekend and everything else so far? Well, Sunday I played sports after church, and my body is dying. Yeah, it's only because, when you're out in the sun for so long playing sports, just sweating so much. And your body just gets more exhausted just being out in the sun. Like, the sun is just like all over your face and your body, right? We played ultimate frisbee. We played some soccer. And, soccer, it's been like over a year since I played soccer, I think. About a year, right? And, the last time I played was in the tournament last year we had in Houston, of course, in which our team won, and I got the golden boot. So we have another tournament coming in September, the end of September, so I need to get myself back into soccer shape. But it felt really good to play soccer again. And, of course, I need to defend my golden boot title from last tournament. It was 6 goals in 6 games, so I am pretty stoked and excited about that. But, I'm really looking forward to this soccer tournament. Yes, we have a holiday on Monday, and of course it's still Monday over here. Today, I have a family lunch. My brother's coming over to the house. We're going to eat lunch together as a family, and then after we're going to go out and hang out with the guys at the church and stuff like that too. Maybe go watch a movie, eat some food, or maybe go bowling or something along that line, because it's a holiday. Everyone's got the day off, so it's a time to just hang out and chill. Actually, for Monday, like today, I was actually thinking to myself, like, man, you know what? I'm thinking about doing nothing. Like, absolutely nothing, just relaxing and just being, lazy at home. But then I realized that I already do that every day. I already do that all the time anyway, so I'm definitely going to go out and hang out with the guys and stuff like that too. Provi in the media today, I am super excited to go over this article about the protests that happened on Sunday. There's one in Seoul and one in Daejeon. When I get into this article, you guys it's going to be amazing, okay? Because when you hear the numbers of people that protested on the peaceful protest on Sunday, it is unbelievable. Like, it's incredible. It just gave me a lot of different thoughts too, but we'll go over that in the last segment today. Oh, by the way, huge upset alert in the Women's World Cup. The U.S. lost to Sweden. Now, I didn't watch the game, but I did see the highlights, and I was shocked by the highlights. Sweden, they didn't even take a shot on net until 83 minutes into the game. Remember, the game's only 90 minutes, and they took their first shot on net at the 83rd minute, right? So U.S. was just dominant, overpowering them, but it was the goalie. The goalie on Sweden was incredible, and then it went to penalty shots, and it was pretty crazy. Everyone was missing the net. And finally, at the very, very end, really weird to see how the U.S. lost. The defending champions, number 1 ranking in the world, lost, and it was crazy. The final shot that went in, the girl from Sweden kicked it. The goalie stopped it, but it was flying in the air and going in towards the net, and the goalie swatted it out, right? However, they did the replay and they said the ball crossed the line before the goalie swatted it out, and that's how they won the game. So for me, I'm just like, it's pretty crazy. But, why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because I don't really like the women's U.S. soccer team. I'm actually happy they lost. Well, I'm not happy. I just have a really bad taste in my mouth for the U.S. women's soccer team. Those guys don't know there. Well, for me, my favorite team right now in the Women's World Cup is Japan. Like, they are the team I hope they win. Japan is so good. They're very, very technical. The way they pass, they look more like a real soccer team to me than any other team that I saw. It was Japan. Japan looks awesome. So I am rooting for Japan to win, and they'll be playing Sweden for the semifinal. So that's gonna be wild. But the U.S. women's soccer team, I don't know if you guys have heard the news about them, but in North America, you hear about them. They're very, very like woke. They're into politics. They made a huge mess about their pay, and they're like, the men are getting paid this much, and we win more than them, and we get paid so much. We've won like 2 or 3 World Cups, and we get paid so much less than them. The men have won nothing, and yet they still get paid more. And it's all about the women and men's pay gap between the U.S. men's and women's soccer team. And for me. If you guys don't know the argument, it's a ridiculous argument, like really ridiculous. It doesn't even make sense what they're talking about, that the men and women should be paid the same, and it's not true. They should not be paid the same, right? It's very, very interesting because like, this is kind of one of the biggest things that are talked about in some women's sports, like the WNBA and the U.S. women's soccer. And the reason why, like, if all things were the same, if both leagues, if the men's and women's teams were generating the same amount of money, then I understand that you should complain that you should be paid the same because you're generating the same amount of money, right? But the problem with women's soccer is the men's soccer team generates like 100 times more than them. But the women's team is only complaining that the men and women shouldn't be paid differently because that's sexist. And for everyone else who's normal and reasonable will understand that it doesn't make any sense. Like, let me give you an example. The men's World Cup generates $6 billion, and the women's World Cup generates like $130 million. That's a huge gap. So the U.S. women's soccer team used the woke agenda to get the same pay as men. So guess what happened? They got a contract, so they're getting paid the same as men, right? But here's the crazy thing. Since the men make so much more money than the women, the men are losing money from what they generate, and it goes to the women. So when you look at the U.S. women's soccer team, the women's team gets like 20% of the cut, and the men only get 6%. So now, getting that equality for pay, when it's more about how much you generate, right? It's not like I can say that, hey, guess what? Our LA Church's soccer team, we've won 2 championships already, so how come we don't get paid like the U.S. women's soccer? It's comparing 2 things that don't even go together. So the women are now taking from the men's earnings, and they're getting 20% of the cut, and the men are only getting 6% of the cut because the women keep all their pay, and then they take from the men's pay. So yeah, and like. If you really want to get, like, I know that most of us here are not really into, like, if it was the exact same situation and the women were getting paid less, obviously we would make a big, we would say, oh, that's not fair, because that makes sense, right? But it's nothing close. It isn't anything close, and it was just the way that they went about it. It was very, very unfair, right? And let me tell you something about the U.S. women's soccer team. If you want to know the level of the number 1 ranked women's soccer team in the world, like, this is the level compared to guys. The U.S. women's soccer team, before the World Cup started, they played against a boys' high school team, which means they were 14 years old. They played against a boys' high school team, 14 years old, and lost 5-2. So you get an idea that the number 1 ranked women's national soccer team in the world loses to just a regular high school team, 14 years old boys, and they lost 5-2, right? So you kind of get an idea. This is kind of what the level is like. And for me, that's why it just left a bad taste in my, like, even the WNBA, makes no sense to me. Like, their league in general loses $10 million a year. Their league loses money, and the men's league has to subsidize the women's team. But then the women are complaining that they're not getting paid enough, even though as a whole, they are losing money kind of thing. So for me, that's for one of the reasons it's like, oh, like, can't we just have sports being sports instead of like talking about all the other different things and making it into a politicized thing and stuff. Like, I can't stand that. But, it's slowly coming into American and Canadian sports too. And it's something that just kind of irks me. But that's just a small group of people. Right? But I do understand it's whatever it takes for them to get more money, right? They want to get paid. So, whatever it takes, and I'm not going to blame them to say, oh, but they just kind of take it into another level when they use that type of reasoning, which really doesn't really make any sense. But it worked and they get paid more money. So kudos to them for that. Okay, so we're on this men's, not women's. Like, I was just talking about the women's U.S. women's soccer team, and I know that all women are not like that, obviously, right? But one thing that I'm really into is I like cooking shows. Do you guys like cooking shows? Like, in the beginning it was like Hell's Kitchen, or you'll find other ones like Master Chef, Top Chef, Chopped. And I found this new cooking show. It's called Ciao. So it's like you select all these cooks from, I think, from America and Canada, and they take them to Tuscany or like someplace in Italy, and it's all about pasta. And it's really, really interesting. I love food. And I love watching cooking shows and these contests to see who can make the best things, or who's the best cook, or the best head chef, whatever it is. And it really inspires me. It makes me want to learn how to cook gourmet food, right? So this new show called Ciao is very interesting. It starts off with 10 cooks, and every challenge they mix teams, right? And what happens is, let's just say the first challenge is like 5-on-5, right? 2 teams of 5. But what happens is the losing team. So there's 5 people that lost, right? So there's 2 teams. One team loses, and that team, those 5 people, amongst themselves have to choose someone to kick out of the contest. Like, that's what makes it a little bit different, because you have to kick out a fellow chef. The judges don't kick out people. It's the cooks. So if someone made something bad, if someone was a bad leader, whatever it was, then they vote to kick them. So it's way more political. Like, it's political as in you're trying to figure out who you want to kick out that is the most, what do you call it? They'll be the most threat to you and stuff like that too. But the thing that's very, very interesting about this show is seeing the difference between men and women, the way that they think and the way that they act. And this is one of the reasons why this makes it so much more interesting, is watching this show. It is so clear, the difference between men and women, like super clear. So, the example is when it comes to critiquing each other or voting for their team, the teammate to leave that they want to kick out, right? Oh, the men are super clear and so straightforward that it sometimes looks insensitive. Right? And the men too, when they're like in the kitchen, it's such a pride challenge. Like the alpha male jockeying for who is the one in charge, who knows more. The way that the men speak and the way that the women speak are very, very different. Right? But the men they challenge more. They make more suggestions. They make more critiques, and they are very clear on who is the weakest in their team and who they want to kick out. Yeah, it's crazy. Like the girls. The girls are very, very interesting, because when the girls are speaking about each other, critiquing and other stuff, they are very careful with their words. They even apologize with tears when they vote for someone out. Here's a crazy part. When I saw one of these, it was only the second episode. In one challenge, it was girls versus guys. And the girls, when it came, like, the girls lost, and they had decided, they have to decide to kick someone out. The girls decided not to vote because they didn't want to hurt each other. Like, they just met. It's a contest. $50,000. All this stuff is on the line, right? And they just met. This is the second episode. They said, no, we're not going to vote, so we're going to leave it to the judges. I'm like, wow. That's how much they care about these, in the setting of a contest. I was shocked, right? I was just like, whoa, like, why would you put up to the judges when it's like, even for everyone watching, it is clear who is the weakest link in that team. But they didn't want to hurt each other. They didn't want to hurt each other's feelings. They don't want to vote for anyone, right? Like, I was thinking that, look at these girls like, man, these girls are crazy. Because think about this. Well, what if the judges choose, like they weren't in the kitchen with them? What if they choose someone that didn't deserve to leave? You know what I mean? Like, then you'd be like, I was like, it's so clear who the worst teammate was and who cooked the worst. And even though all the girls knew who was the worst, they wouldn't vote. And I'm like, as a guy, I'm just like, well, you guys are crazy, right? This is about winning. Right? It's not about who's going to be best friends at the end. And everyone knows it's like, and that's kind of where the guys thinking comes from. I'm just like, whoa. Like, and even the guys were like, how could you not vote? They're all thinking these girls are crazy. But when you look at it, it's interesting just to see the difference between the guys and the girls. Like the girls, when it's time to choose who's the losing team, like they'll choose the team that wins and the girl on the team will start crying. They're like, oh, I was so scared. Like they're crying. Guys are not crying. Guys are just like, all right, got it. Okay. Oh, yeah. I was the weakest link. All right, cool. And then they leave. It's done. But the girls are crying. They're all crying, right? It reminds me of what Sunseem said before. He's like, I don't trust girls that cry. No, I don't trust a girl's tears. Sorry. He said, I don't trust a girl's tears because girls cry a lot. And he says, I trust a guy's tears because when they cry, it's like they don't want to cry. And they cry when they really, really need to cry. Like there's no other reason. Like they're gonna cry. But girls, since they cry so much, it's hard to trust a girl's tears because they cry so much, right? But you could look at this and just see the difference between guys and girls. And you can see how guys can be somewhat insensitive and they can hurt others because they're very straightforward. It's all about the goal. The goal, the purpose is what we want. And they kind of leave people in the dust and stuff, right? And they can be seen as very insensitive, where the girls, like, they care too much, right? They're very, very about feelings, their feelings and other people's feelings. It's just, you guys got to watch the show if you want to know what I'm talking about. It's very interesting. The only girl there that is, there's one girl there, one of the girls, and she is very manly. Like very manly, what do you call it? Her character is very manly. Like, remember when I told you that the girls wouldn't vote? She was the only one that voted and clearly pointed out the girl who was the weakest, and the rest of the girls said, we're not voting. Yeah, it was, for me, I was like, yeah. And she's someone who won another cooking contest in the past, and you can see how kind of, what's the word? Yeah, she's kind of very manly. Like, the way that she acts is more like the guys than the girls. Very strategic. Who she votes for, everything else, she's very strategic about it. So I think, I haven't even seen the ending yet. I personally think she's going to win. Yeah, like, she's done it before. She's been through the contests, and I think she's going to win. I really, really do. But interesting. It's interesting just to see the difference between the guys and the girls. That's what I thought. And I think that's something that you guys should also just take a look at. Well, I like cooking shows. That's why I watched it. But I'm telling you guys, it's just so interesting to see the contrast between guys and girls and how much it's not about who's better. It's really about knowing guys and girls and how to understand each other better, right? I think that's a big thing. And I think that's one of the things that I was thinking about too is if you make the line in Providence too strict between guys and girls, by the time they get to marriage, they're just going to misunderstand each other for like the first 4 years. And they're going to be like, why is she like this? Oh, why is she like that? Oh, and they're going to start fighting with each other because they don't really know and understand between the sexes and stuff. Like I said before, I'm not saying get rid of the line. I'm just saying that there's got to be a way where people are able to socialize properly so that they can really understand each other better and there won't be as many misunderstandings. Like, that's just my feeling, right? So that's just, it's just interesting, those couple things that I've been watching that show. So I don't know what you guys think. If you guys have any thoughts about these two, go ahead, write it in the comments below. And of course, for me, a lot of it is me generalizing, right? Because, we can generalize when you look at just kind of the overall situation. And of course, person to person, it might be a little bit different, but yeah. Oh, new poll question. You guys see the new poll question yet? It's about long term. What will be the most important thing to make Provi grow in the future? I don't even have an answer for this. These are just some of the things that we do talk about on this channel. Is evangelism going to make things grow the most? Is it the community? Is it having children? Is it the organizational system? Like, all of these things are important. They're all important. But which one do you think is going to be the most important of them all? Right? And it's purely opinion. I'm researching stuff on it right now and talk about my findings on Friday. But that is something that I thought was, because I talked about becoming a mainstream religion and what it takes is a second gen and stuff. But I was thinking to myself, is what makes it grow the most? And I'm researching different religions, different parts of Christianity, how they're growing really quickly, what makes them grow so fast and such too. So I thought it was something very, very, very interesting. And I wanted to know what you guys think about it right now. I think how many people have actually voted for this? So far, we have already 41 people. And at the moment, the community is by far ahead at 61%. Organizational systems at second with 20%. And then evangelism and having children are both at 10%, which is quite interesting. And like I said, I don't have an answer. I'm researching it right now, so it's just interesting to see what people think, but it's so far ahead. The community is at 61%. 41 people voted already. Let me see what you guys think about this too. You guys can write in the comment section below too about what you think about which of the polling questions you think is probably the most important one. Okay? Oh, also, just remember, guys, Q&A Thursdays coming up in 2 days, so make sure you send your questions in. Would love to get your questions about the stuff that's going on, what's going on around the world and stuff like that, too. Okay, so there it is. That's segment number 1. Let's get into the first musical break of the day. right, so let's get into the word study for today. And every Tuesday we have the practical word study. And this week's message is very interesting. And one of the things I really enjoyed was Sunsim going over the concept of the Lord coming with a body. That in the Old Testament time, God said he would come, right? But instead, we had Jesus come as the body. Right? God always needs, the Spirit needs a body to speak on this earth. And the same thing is going to happen in the second coming. Now, one of the greatest secrets that came from the message, it said the greatest secret that Jesus knew is that the Messiah had come. Like that was the great secret. And when we think about this, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense because everyone's been waiting for the Messiah. And that would be the greatest secret of that time is, yeah, the Messiah, the one, the Savior, the one who comes to save all mankind has come. And if you think about it, like truthfully, even today, that is the greatest secret that all Christians wait for today is when is the Lord's second coming? And when Sunsi went over this, I thought it was very powerful because remember when we first learned the word, and of course I come from the former faith, and coming from the former faith is very, very interesting because I had that mentality and mindset, very literal translations of the Bible. And when I heard the word, it was so mind-bending, even to the point my mind broke. Like it was that powerful. Because if you think about this, I was in the former faith for all my life until, for 20 years as a Christian, giving my life to Christ at 10, giving my life again at like 12 and 15, being baptized. I was someone who was I even wanted to be a pastor when I was 14 years old, right? And I learned the word within 8 months. And think about this, within 8 months, 20 years of all my thoughts and perspectives were just burnt away through the words. Like that's how powerful it was. And I'm just like, whoa, these words are just crazy kind of thing, right? And I think one of the things that we have to realize and recognize once again is we need to listen to the word again. Like we need to realize, like re-realize how powerful and how great these words truly are. And I would suggest if, whoever's like listening to lectures these days, I'm not sure how many newcomers are actually studying in your churches, because from what I've heard and what I know, there's not like a ton of newcomers right now. There's not a ton of people that are being evangelized at the moment. So if you do have a chance and you need to listen to one of these lectures, go into the my Patreon and check out, I'd say the lessons that are most pertinent for this would be like fire, last days, and clouds. Like those are 3 powerful lessons. And it's totally about the reshaping of our perspective and perception on what we thought God was going to do, right? And I think it's very, very interesting when you think about, one thing I did want to talk about is I want to go over some commentaries of what Christians think about the end times and last days, particularly when it comes to the fire, last day, and the clouds. Right? So here's a couple things. Like for instance, in the New Testament, we look at the Lord's second coming when it talks about fire. We look at like 2 Peter chapter 3. And in 2 Peter chapter 3, verses, I think 10 to 13. Right? And in 10 to 13, it does talk about the world will be destroyed by fire. Heavens will disappear with a roar. Elements destroyed and everything else will be laid bare, right? So what are some Christian thoughts on this, their interpretations, right? And they say that, the earth, like we're talking about 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 10 to 13, the earth and all the works that are in it shall be burnt up. The earth and its inhabitants and all the works that are there shall be burnt up. The earth, its inhabitants, all the works, whether nature or art, shall all be destroyed. So it's definitely a very literal interpretation of this verse, right? And like the way that the commentary talks, like every palace, anything that we thought was great, the gardens, all the desirable things wherein worldly minded men seek and place their happiness, all of them shall be burnt up, and all sorts of creatures which God has made, and all the works of men must submit, all pass through the fire, which shall be a consuming fire to all that sin has brought into the world. Though it may be refining fire to the works of God's hands, it's the glass of the creation being made much brighter, the saints may much better discern the glory of the Lord therein, right? So it's very, very interesting. And it talks about the difference between the first coming of Christ and the second coming, right? because they call it the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And that's in Malachi chapter 4, verse 5, talking about the first coming. And then they said, how much more dreadful must this coming to judgment be? May we be so wise to prepare for it, that it may not be a day of vengeance and destruction unto us. Oh, what will become of us if we set our affections on this earth and make it our portion? Seeing all these things shall be burnt up. Look out, therefore, and make sure of a happiness beyond this visible world, which must be melted down, right? So you see, when it comes to the fire, it's obviously talking something very literal, and it's very, I would say it is very interesting, the thoughts that everything's going to be judged physically speaking, right? And that's what, and this is going to be the demise of the former faith if they don't understand properly about how the Lord comes back again. So think about this. There's like 2.2 billion Christians in the world right now, 2.5, something along that line. And they say by the time it hits 2060, we should have about 3.3 billion Christians in the world, right? People that believe in Jesus. But imagine that amount of people believing a certain way that they cannot understand that the Lord is already here. Like, that is such a huge secret, but you need to know what they're thinking. Because if you don't know what they're thinking, then we're not going to realize how valuable the words we have, right? That people, oh, you better be ready because the judgment will come and you will all be burned. Not a single person will be spared. However, those who are righteous, the fire will burn us brighter, and those that are unrighteous, they will be like turned to stubble and stuff like that too. So it is a very scary thought. It's not just people, it's the entire earth with everything that we hold dearly will be burnt up, right? And that's something when we look at, it's very interesting how there's a separation between the first and second coming, right? So my mistake was, I thought when they cited Malachi 4 verse 5, I thought they were citing the first coming, but they're actually talking about the second coming. They're using the Old Testament to cite the second coming, which it doesn't make sense if you don't believe the way we believe. And what does that mean? It makes sense to say the Old Testament is talking about the second coming also, because we say that history repeats itself. So if you look at the way that the Messiah came at Jesus' time, then you'll understand how it happened in the second coming. Why? Because it'll happen in the exact same way, because God doesn't change, right? But if you're thinking like from a perspective where history doesn't repeat itself, and you actually think that the first coming and second coming are going to be completely different, that's where it doesn't really make any sense to cite the Old Testament for the second coming instead of the first coming, right? So when you look at this, there's a lot of different holes that we see in doctrine and the way that people believe, that it's like, oh, that doesn't really make sense here. And this is why when you start listening to the word and the pieces start coming together, this is why people freak out when we listen to the word in Providence. We're like, what? That's so crazy. Like, we need to know how amazingly powerful the words that we have are. That God is a God that loves everyone. Like, why would God need to judge the animals in all of nature when they actually haven't done anything wrong, right? Like, what's the point of judging everyone in this way? And when you look at the true judgment, remember, the true judgment that we have is not physical, but it's spiritual. So if the true judgment is spiritual, how can you judge the spirit by fire, like a physical fire, right? A physical cannot judge the spiritual. Just like, I believe, where does it say that, is it John chapter 4? Or where it says, flesh gives birth to flesh and the spirit gives birth to spirit. I think it's John chapter 4, right? Is it? John chapter 3, verse 6, sorry. Right? Flesh gives birth to flesh, but the spirit gives birth to spirit, right? So a spiritual thing has to judge the spirit, and a physical thing has to judge the physical. Just like when we look at the Old Testament time, because the spirits were dead, all the judgment was physical. People were dying. People were given disease. People lost their life. People, went through like physical turmoil. However, we look at 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 18 through 20, and that shows us that their spirits weren't judged because Jesus didn't come yet. And that's why Jesus preached to the spirits in prison, which means in the Old Testament time, the judgment was all physical because the spirit died. The Messiah hasn't come yet, and they still had to get a chance for their spirits to be judged. If the physical could judge the spiritual, then why would Jesus preach them when he could just say, well, you've already been judged by the flood, so why would I give you a second chance when the physical can judge the spiritual? But reasonably speaking, if the physical only judges the physical, then later on something spiritual has to judge the spiritual. And what is the biggest spiritual judge that we have, which is the words of God? Right? That is the greatest judge we have for the spirit, because the gospel, the words that are preached to us, they're preached telling us that the Messiah is here, that this person is the Messiah, that God has come back. People realize who the man of mission of this history is, right? And through that, it's whether you believe or not. That's a spiritual thing. Spiritual meaning it is not something on the outside where I can say that, oh, I gave $20 million to charity, so that makes me a righteous person and now I'm going to heaven. It's not that. That's only for the physical. But the spiritual is something that has to be having to do with God. Do you believe the words of God? Do you believe that this person came from God? Do you see, like, it's the realization we have that is much deeper, which goes much further on also, right? So that is something that I thought was like, yeah, it's when we really get down to the nitty gritty, we realize how powerful and how great the words are, right? So that has to do with the fire in the last days. That has to do with the fire, the ending of the world by fire, and it's very literal. Now, the second thing that that has to do with fire in the last days and what was the other one I was talking about? The last days and also clouds. And I think these are very, very powerful, right? So the last days, when it comes to the former faith, commentaries talk about the destruction of the particular enemies of the church, right? Or a complete conquest of them would be something that they would consider as one of the end times where the Christ coming has to do with defeating your enemies or conquering them, right? It'll be done at the great day, or it could be applied metaphorically to destructions, right? But of course, when we think about this, people are talking about these heavenly signs, right? These heavenly signs of the earth, the sun, moon, and stars, and also the end times, meaning it's literally the last days, right? The last days. Right? So this is something that when we look at this, like the sun will be dark and the moon shall not give light, right? And, of course, we know that the moon shines with the borrowed light from the sun. So it has to do with the sun itself, right? And basically, if the sun turns dark, then the moon, it becomes bankrupt also. The stars are going to fall. They'll lose their light and disappear as if they were fallen. Why? Because, the stars are reflecting the light also of the sun, right? I believe. So that's why we're able to see them in our sky. But if there is no sun, there's nothing to reflect, which also means that we wouldn't even see the stars in the sky anymore, right? So, this is one of the things that we look at as the power of the heavens will be shaken. And it means there's going to be a huge change. Right? Huge change. Things are going to be made new, a restitution, and there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth, that the old things will pass away with a great noise, and there's going to be all these, like a new heaven, new earth being created, right? So it's going to be a visible change, and all the world is going to take notice of it, because, how can you not take notice of the sun darkening, which also makes the moon darken too, right? It would be an amazing or crazy change for the heavenly bodies in the sky to all of a sudden make this crazy change, right? And so they're saying, like, it's probably talking about symbolically something of a lasting change, right? Or universal change. So there's a lot of different things here we look at and say, wow, this is going to be something very, very big, that no matter what, it's going to be something so noticeable to the eye. Even if they don't think it's literal, it's supposed to be such a lasting change and so noticeable to the eyes. But when we learn about the sun, moon, and stars, it is not noticeable to the eyes, right? It's about a new level coming. When Jesus came, the sun, moon, and stars, we know the parable of sun, moon, and stars. And if you don't know them, you can check out Sun, Moon, and Stars on my Patreon and go through the entire explanation on that. But when we understand like this, the difference is like, wait, it's supposed to be something noticeable, but when you look at even what Providence has done, it is not noticeable. It's not all of a sudden like, whoa, there's a big noise and this happened and now we see the new words. No, it is quiet and it happens very, very slowly, right? It's not some glorious appearance of the Messiah who will show himself as the brightness of his Father's glory, expressing the image of his person, and the sun and moon and all the stars, they'll have no glory because the glory of God is that great. It's very, very literal. And it makes no sense because they will never, if they're expecting that, we can see already, they will never see that. It'll never be that way. Right? And it's something that we have to look at and say, we have to understand is what we understand helps us to know the time we're living in right now. And the way that people believe in the past, man, it's so different from what we believe right now. And if you don't understand the words properly, if you don't understand the Bible properly, what's going to happen is that very day when the Christ comes, you will have no idea and he'll be right under your nose. And that was one of the sad parts. The time of Jesus is Jesus was walking amongst the people who were waiting for him, but not a single person could recognize him. That's how crazy it was, right? And that's why we have to realize about how powerful the fire, the last days, the clouds lessons, how powerful they really are and how much they're reshaping our minds so much to the point where I can't even remember the time where I actually believed that it was literal. But I remember that first time I learned the word, it was powerful. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy kind of thing. Fire was just mind-blowing for me. The fire was crazy. I was like, wow, what a powerful and clear lesson for me. So I would say if you guys get a chance in your churches, go ahead, check it out, Fire Last Days in the Clouds, to get our minds back into understanding how great the lessons are. I would even suggest you going onto YouTube and check out what people talk about Fire Last Days in Clouds and what the former faith actually thinks about it and the preaching they have, right? Because when you listen to what people really believe, you're like, whoa, it is so different and it's so different than what we've experienced in the past or so different than what we thought, right? It just doesn't even make sense to us anymore. So that's the first thing I would do for something practical to do this week. The second thing I was thinking about was when the message at the very, very end was talking about the Pharisees only washing their hands before eating, where Jesus was someone who was constantly washing his hands, where the Pharisees, Sadducees would save all the dirt just so they can show people they're washing their hands and getting all the dirt and grime off right before they ate. And it was kind of like, it kind of reminds me of what people do today, like companies and people do like virtue signaling, right? They're just kind of signaling that they're virtuous, but they're not really doing anything real about it, right? It's like saying save climate change, but yet even the vegetables and stuff that, people who don't eat meat and stuff like that do is they're all being shipped on planes and trucks that are causing a lot of the climate change too, like a lot of the CO2 to go into the air, right? So when you think about this, it's like, wow, that's like, it's just virtue signaling where they're not really doing anything major about it. They're just showing that, oh, look what I did kind of thing, right? It's all for show. And it was kind of funny. It's like, yeah, these people don't even wash their hands after they poop, right? And then they go and they wash it right before they eat just to show off, where Jesus was doing it all the time. And of course, that reminds us of repentance. It's better to repent every single day, twice a day, 3 times a day, and have very little to repent about because you're doing it so often, instead of waiting for months and months till all your sins have built up and then you come before crying and saying, oh, my sins, right? And it's like, that's the biggest difference is Jesus was someone who was always clean, constantly cleaning himself, where the Pharisees, Sadducees, teachers of the law were the ones that were waiting for that one moment so that in that moment they could say, look what I'm doing, right? And it kind of shows that, it seems like saying it's not genuine, it's not authentic, right? Because they can wash their hands, right? It's almost hypocritical because they're telling people what to do and they're kind of just showing off, but they're not like that in their regular private life, right? And it's like they sacrifice their private life so that they look better in public, which is quite interesting because I talked about this was it last week or yesterday? I was like, over 90% of your life is in private. People don't see your private life. Shouldn't that be more important than the public life? To show off that you're giving to charity, but then in your private life, it's far better for someone to be spending an hour a day in their private life going around helping the poor, rather than spending that 10% of your life in the public, just showing people that, oh, look, I'm giving money, oh, look, I'm doing this kind of thing, right? And I think we can look at it and reflect on our own lives. Like, are there times where we're not genuine, right? Like, not genuine is like, I'm going to say this because I've done this before, where you're so tired, but because you're a leader, you need to show face, right? Especially when it comes to Zoom. Sometimes, and there's no video, sometimes you can, like, you're so tired, you turn on the Zoom just to show that you're logged on, but then you'll just go back to sleep. You know what I mean? Like, that's something that's not genuine. I'm not sure if anyone has gone through that before, or you're like, it's different. That is different than actually sitting down in front of, and you're so tired and you're falling asleep, but you're trying. You're sitting in front of the computer, you're listening, you're logged in and stuff like that too, right? Or when you go to church and you tell people, how you are living, but you're just simply lying, right? You're not truthful about your life, or you're maybe just embarrassed or ashamed that you don't want to tell people the truth, right? But, like, there's like some things that we could be hypocritical in because we're not super genuine about it. Like, genuineness, I do think, is we're pretty honest. Like, yeah, I struggled. I struggled with pre-dawn today. Oh, I struggled with this. Yeah, I didn't get up today. Right? These are all things that are very genuine, where it's no longer about how you look in your image towards others in church. But when we become really, really genuine, I think that's part of the community and part of having this transparency between each other, where you can actually say, I miss pre-dawn, and not feel like everyone is judging you. Like, missing pre-dawn and feeling guilty is different, because, the guilt means that you wanted to do it. Oh, I should have done it, but I couldn't do it. That's different than, like, not doing it and then tell people that you're doing it because you're embarrassed, or you're not transparent, and you feel like, oh, if I say this, then people are going to look down on me. I think that's something that we do need to change. But I was thinking deeply about this also. And I think people can misunderstand what this means too. Like, living the genuine life. Like, I do think there's living a true genuine life, and like living in hypocrisy and a fake life, right? Like, the fake life, I think, is when you just don't care. You don't care. You don't care about changing. You don't care about making yourself any better, right? You just don't care. It means that you're just saying things because you have to say it. You don't really care when you go home. You're not living the life. You don't care about don't pray, all those different things. Your life is your life, and it's completely different than what you are at church. Like, that's something where it's like true hypocrisy, and someone who definitely just, honestly, they're just, you're kind of stepping closer and closer to leaving, right? But I think it's different than someone else who is trying to change. And we're going to make mistakes along the way. We're not going to be perfect. We know what we should do, but we just haven't reached that level. Like, that's a completely different thing to me, because you genuinely want to change, and it takes time, and it takes effort, and it's gradual. So even though you might say things differently than what you're doing, your mentality and attitude is to become better, is to value the words more. And sometimes we just don't live up to it, and that's fine, right? And we really talk about what we want to be more than what we already are, but we want to change. And I do think sometimes we beat ourselves down because we're not perfect, or we're not the way we want to be. And I think that could be kind of dangerous, right? When the message of hypocrisy or not being genuine comes out, I don't think we should like automatically say, well, I'm not living the proper life right now, so I'm a hypocrite. And I don't think so. If you're someone trying to trying to push yourself every day, that's different than genuinely not caring at all, right? Like, you feel it in your heart, like, oh, I should do better. Yeah, I should do better. And you're not, we obviously can feel the guilt in our hearts that we should do better. We feel bad in front of God, but it's part of the process of growing. We're never going to be perfect from the beginning. We're going to grow. We're going to grow and get better and better. And I think that is something that you shouldn't beat yourself over, because you're trying, right? That's like saying that because you've never evangelize someone who's passed, then all your efforts in the past are worthless. And I'm like, no, your efforts are worth something because you tried. You're actually trying to evangelize. You're actually trying to go out meeting people. You're teaching, you're growing, right? That is way different, right? And I think that it's all worth something. People will have their choice. People will have their chance to make their own decisions, to realize to come to this history or not. But the effort that came before, it all plays a huge role. And I think that's something that we have to realize even more deeply too. Okay, so that is something that I was looking at, and I was thinking to myself, is like, yeah, we do have to think about this differently. We do have to be people that really understand the word more powerfully, and try not to get into the trap of beating yourself down when you don't need to beat yourself that much, because it's a different mentality and mindset, right? But I do think we should reflect back on the things that we should be changing, because I know sometimes we give up. Like sometimes people are having a hard time with pre-dawn, and then they miss so many of them, they just think it's not worth it and they give up. And I think we got to get back on that horse and just realize it's part of the process, right? So those are kind of the two things that I was thinking about for this week's practical word study. If you have any things you want to add to it, go ahead, leave a comment below. Would love to hear what you guys think about that too. Okay, so there it is, guys. That is today's word study, the practical word study. Hope you guys really enjoyed that. All right. So before we get into the last segment, Provi in the media, let's get into our second music break of the day.
When I look at you, it's like I got the whole room on the tip of my finger, and I'm pointing it right back to you. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole universe, the whole universe. Never thought that living could be easy, so you taught me right from wrong. Now I'm free to be full of love, full of hope. I'm empty of all things. I'm living to make everyone come follow me. This is a life worth living that I know. If I love someone else, what would he give me though? It's like I'm floating on clouds, my feet don't touch the ground. Life with you is like heaven, look at what I found. You said believe in me, don't change, and then you'll see a life that lasts for all eternity. And I will never live to have any regrets. I know you're the best. I'll step to the west, I'll follow behind you step by step. Just like the stars above, we shining, shining. Look at the world in my hands, and the universe is mine. It's yours, can't escape from the love. It's yours, it's yours, can't escape from the love. It's yours. Just like the stars above, we shining, shining. Look at the world in my hands, the universe is mine. It's yours, can't escape from the love. It's yours, it's yours, can't escape from the love. It's yours. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole room on the tip of my finger, and I'm pointing it right back to you. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole universe, the whole universe. You said believe in me, don't change, and then you'll see a life that lasts for all eternity. And I will never live to have any regrets. I know you're the best. I'll step to the west, I'll follow behind you step by step. Just like the stars above, we shining, shining. Look at the world in my hands, the universe is mine. It's yours, can't escape from the love. It's yours, it's yours, can't escape from the love. It's yours. Just like the stars above, we shining, shining. Look at the world in my hands, the universe is mine. It's yours, can't escape from the love. It's yours, it's yours, can't escape from the love. It's yours. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole room on the tip of my finger, and I'm pointing it right back to you. When I look at you, it's like I got the whole universe, 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 the whole universe.
Okay, so let's get into our final segment, which is Provi in the media. And I am super stoked about this article I'm going to read for you guys today. It is awesome. I told you guys on Sunday in Korea, they had two protests, one right after the other. One was in Seoul in front of City Hall, I believe, and the second one was in Daejeon. Okay, so I'm gonna read this article to you. And when I read this to you, you're gonna be like so shocked by how many people actually showed up for these peaceful protests. Okay, so here is the article. It says peaceful protests over the weekend. It says CGM, the Christian Gospel Mission, call for Pastor Myung-suk Jung to be innocent. Large-scale gatherings in Seoul and Daejeon. So here it is, guys. I'm going to read it to you. You're going to be freaking out, okay? A total of 15,000 members of CGM gathered. And the protest was called "The Truth of Pastor Myung-Suk Jung Will Be Revealed" protest. And the Christian Evangelical Missionary Association and Daejeon Kumsan Church Association, so those are our two churches in Daejeon, or the two associations in Daejeon and Kumsan, that they had a press release on August 6th that the rally has been held every week since mid-July to condemn the media's distorted reports and demand a fair trial. And guess how many people there? Estimated 3,000 people showed up to that one. So you're talking a total of 18,000 people that showed up on Sunday for these demonstrations against the trial. They're also quoted, a total of 15,000 members of the CGM held a rally at 4 p.m. on August 6th at the Grass Square in front of Seoul City Hall, and 5 p.m. in front of Daejeon. Oh, it's a total. Sorry. So it's total, which means 12,000 in Seoul and 3,000 in Daejeon. All right. So that makes sense. So it's 15,000 altogether. Now, the Christian Gospel Mission Church Members Association and the Daejeon Kumsan Members Association, which are hosted by two meetings in Seoul and Daejeon, are consultative bodies formed voluntarily by missionary members to voice Sunsim's side externally. The event in Seoul was led by churches in the Gangbuk area, which is north of the Gangnam River area of Seoul, including the Whitestone Church of the Lord, among the churches belonging to the Missionary Society. All right, so Whitestone Church is part of that one. And then CGM Member Council and Daejeon Kumsan Member Association said in the document, at this event, women leaders condemned the sexual crime frame against Sunsim, which was formed through the media. They said Sunsim has been vigilant against discrimination against women and recognized the individuality and ability of female church members and established them as leaders. And they said, stop it, he explained, at a rally in front of Seoul City Hall. There was a pastor of the Whitestone Church, and they said that Sunsim, who has been watching for 40 years, this pastor has been watching Sunsim for 40 years, always teaches the Spirit of Jesus and shows the life of a practitioner by example in front of his disciples. This pastor also said, I am angry at the media and society for turning the pastor I respect into a sexual exploiter and slandering us as accomplices. So I decided to hold this rally. In addition, he was also quoted, there was also testimony from a member who was a face star at the event. And according to the Missionary Member Association, the face star means a member who is engaged in the gospel ministry of the mission without marriage within CGM. And in the meantime, it is an explanation that the face star was sold as a target for sexual exploitation by Sunsim. That's what people are saying, obviously, right? Through false information from those who left becoming face stars and the prosecution briefing, right? And also another anonymous church member who identified themselves as a face star in a video, it was shown on video at the event, said they've been plagued by all sorts of absurd questions from people around them, such as, are you the target of 10,000 sexual assaults? Sunsim, who showed us, and basically this face star testified that Sunsim showed us a life of serving God without marriage, drinking, or smoking as a difficult path to live, right? And that is the motto of the star, like a face star, right? So there were cries of 30-year-old church members, and at the event, church members who had been practicing their faith in Providence for over 30 years took to the stage to seek the truth, right? There's another person who testified saying they were a member of the Presbyterian Corporation of Providence, and they say, and this person testified, I've listened to many sermons by Sunsim for 33 years, and he has never denied Jesus, and more than anyone else, only taught us that Jesus is the Christ, is not a brainwashed fanatic who follows, but I respect and follow him because I saw the image of God manifested through his actions. Another person testified, this person was 70 years old, said, I will never forget the eyes and words of those who asked, do you go to Providence Church? Even for an elderly person like me. And basically this elderly person testified he showed the true love of Jesus, so please make sure to reveal his innocence. And then the event was followed by an art festival, slogans, video screenings, and the meeting concluded with a prayer meeting for national security and a fair trial for Sunsim. So the organizers of the event said the Mission Church members have suffered indescribable mental, material, and economic damage at work and at home due to the biased broadcast produced by the media for a commercial purpose. And through this, we will correct the lost truth and make it possible for a fair trial to proceed. So Think about that, guys. That's something that's so powerful. I looked at that. It was such a powerful thing to see. 15,000. Like, we were expecting 15,000 for August 20th. So now what do you think is going to be the numbers? I think August 20th is going to be even bigger. Like, maybe, I don't know. I'm guessing 20,000 for August 20th. Like, we were thinking 15,000 for August 20th as the biggest one. 15,000 was the combined total for Daejeon and Seoul for just on Sunday. It is picking up. And it's very, very interesting because there is a comment in the YouTube section when they're talking about the protest, and a Korean actually said, oh, we feel like we have to go, kind of thing, right? And I think that is something that is interesting because there's a huge difference between Asian and Western culture where there's no I have to go. I go because I want to go. And like in Asia, it's very groupthink. So once it happens, then everyone feels like they have to go or they're not really supporting or stuff like that too, right? But I thought it was quite interesting to see 15,000 already happening. This is only August 6th. It was August 6th, though. It's like 2 days ago on Sunday. It is powerful to see that they have this protests are growing more and more. I would be quite interested to hear what Sunsim thinks about it, right? Like, not right now, like while it's going on. Like, I would love to hear what, because, he could be advised by lawyers to say something completely different. I'm not sure, right? I have no idea. But after everything is said and done, I would love to hear what Sunsim's thoughts are on these protests. I really would. Yeah, just to see from his point of view, right? And, he might have talked already about a little bit here and there, but I do think there's going to be a huge difference of what he says right now compared to what he says after all of this is all said and done, right? Because you're in the middle of a trial, so what you say is very important, and you can't make any mistakes at this moment. But I would love to hear what he thinks after all this is done. Yeah, these are just my thoughts, but all things are picking up in Korea. And think about that. If there's 15,000 already, right? 12,000 in Seoul that gathered for that one thing. That's pretty crazy. Because in our heads, we always wonder to ourselves, how many people are actually in Korean Providence? But if you think about this, already 12,000 showed up there. And guess what? Most of them are all married. Like, if you look at the videos, most of the people protesting are all married. They're all older, like the 30s and higher, right? And a friend of mine was telling me, like, yeah, when you watch the video, it's such a contradiction to what people are saying. Because people are saying, oh, this is a church with all tall, pretty girls, and they're all like, there to be like this. Like 10,000 people are he's trying to sleep with 10,000 girls, right? And they're supposed to be face stars, whatever it is. But of course, we only have like 1,000 something face stars, right? In females in Korea. But even the 15,000 that came, they're basically all married. And they're not all tall, pretty, and like models and stuff. It's a huge contradiction from what the media is trying to portray Providence as. So that's one thing that I looked at and said, yeah, it's so ridiculous how they do it this way. So I was looking at that like, yeah, it's pretty bad. Like, you're gonna start to see more and more truth come out, and I hope that everything will culminate more and more. Like, I don't even think August 20th will be the biggest. I think it's just gonna keep getting bigger and bigger. I really do. I wouldn't even be surprised if large groups from Japan and Taiwan go to Korea for these. I wouldn't even be surprised by that, right? Because they're so close, right? And they're very well organized. I can see that happening too. But that's just something that I look at and say, yeah, it's gaining momentum. And they have these separate associations just there to support the trial, make sure that it's a fair trial and such. I'm not sure about all the full details, so I can't tell you that I think it's like really, really good or bad. But just from what I know and from what I see, it's quite amazing. Just from the little information that I know and from what I've seen on YouTube and stuff like that when I'm looking at the live broadcasts of it. All right. So yeah, pretty amazing, guys. 15,000 people doing the protest over the weekend. It's very, very inspiring for me right now. Okay, so there it is, guys. That is the end of today's Tuesday podcast. Hope you guys really enjoyed it. Hope you guys have an amazing and awesome day. And we'll see you guys again tomorrow on the Morning Star Drive on 117.8.
It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and feel your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm like this.